All right, he wasn't quite as defiant as Jim Phillips was during football. He was angry during the football media days. I appreciated that because it was I thought it was entertaining. But I thought Jim Phillips should have been angry about the way that ACC basketball has been disrespected nationally over the last several years. What do you make of his comments about undervalued? There's really no reason. They have only received 5 bids in each of the last 3 years. I don't think they've had great teams, but they seem to have a lot of teams advance. That says something.
Yeah, this is the past 3 seasons. The ACC has gotten 5 teams in each year. The 15 teams in a 3-year stretch. That's the fewest that the league has gotten in a decade. So, and even then, even a decade ago, there were in that span there were 8 top 4 seeds, and there's only been 4 top 4 seeds in the last 3 years combined. So, the top end talent certainly has not been there. And yeah, you're right. If I'm Jim Phillips, I would be upset as well. I think that there have been a number of teams. Last year, you look at like a Pitt, for example, Wake Forest a couple of seasons ago, who have been right on that cut line. And, essentially because the metrics and the indicators that the selection committee has valued don't say that they're in, those teams don't get the benefit of the doubt. So, Commissioner Phillips was very vocal saying that the league did an extensive analysis this spring, looked at scheduling, looked at the net, looked at essentially how are all of these other leagues getting more teams in than us? So it'll be interesting to see if that translates to the ACC actually getting more in this year. I think the fact that the league is expected to be better top to bottom this year is a better reason why we should expect more teams to be in.
Is it better top to bottom? Is that good? Or the fact that it seems, at least based on what I've been able to read and different opinions and different, we'll just say bracketologists, that it does seem still to be Duke and Carolina at the top, and we're not sure that anybody else is really that good nationally, or is that ultimately a problem?
Well, you're going to have Duke and Carolina almost every season. Those are the givens. So if you're Jim Phillips, if you're at the ACC, it's about everybody else. I mean, those are the 2 that you depend upon. I think, and I'm writing a story about this right now, actually, but I think the thing that you're going to see this year is a return from some of those prominent brands who have been successful at the highest levels in the ACC. So a Louisville, a Wake Forest, a Georgia Tech. I think Pittsburgh will be interesting again. Those are, Notre Dame in Mike Bray's heyday. These are all teams who have had success, who have made Elite 8 runs, who have made Final Four runs, and yet necessarily haven't done that lately. Those brands, I think it would be fair to say, have all slipped recently. I would expect that to be something of a reversal this season. And as a result, again, I don't think that, any of those teams are necessarily going to climb to the caliber of Duke or North Carolina. But in terms of being NCAA tournament caliber, I absolutely believe that there are, anywhere from 7 to 10 teams in the league who should feel like they at least have a shot going into the season.
It would also be good if Syracuse, got back to playing representative basketball to Syracuse's legacy. Brendan Marks is joining us here from The Athletic on the Adam Gold Show at Brendan R. Marks on Twitter. You also wrote yesterday, I read it very early this morning, about the ACC's look-in with ESPN, that there are actually 2 separate contracts, and that people, and maybe you're directing this to the national folks who have been saying that ESPN is going to beg off the ACC contract. I've never thought they would, but explain why why ESPN really has no incentive to ditch the ACC.
Yeah, so I think nationally there has been this perception, which turns out to be a misperception, that the entirety of the ACC's media contract is up in February of 2025 and can either widely be, accepted or declined. And if it were to be declined, which some have predicted or postured may happen, then that would result in the ACC going back to the media rights market in 2027, which in effect would create a situation where some of the ACC's teams could be poached. The problem is there are those 2 separate deals that ESPN and the ACC have. It's not one gigantic bundle. There's this base package. Both of them are stemming from 2016, but there's a base package that deals with the ACC's premier inventory. So think about all of the games that are going on ABC, on ESPN, on ESPN2, the big boy games, the big boy networks, and the big boy brands. Then, additionally, in conjunction with the creation of the ACC network, there is an entirely separate ACC network contract for media rights. And that, we did not know, goes until 2036 already. That is not up for debate or discussion or option in February. That is already locked in through 2036. And so the only thing that is up for the look-in period in February is that base package. So ESPN's collection of premier inventory from the ACC's premier brands. Now, in theory, could ESPN decline that option and only have the ACC network games? In theory, yes. However, if you are ESPN, why would you want to give up the best games, the best windows, and the best teams only to keep, the teams who are struggling or the teams who maybe don't attract as many eyeballs? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And so I think this misconception that the entire thing was up for grabs it is not accurate. And essentially what you have is a situation where the ACC is relatively stable. This look-in period is just going to be a way for the ACC to argue for, amongst other things, better time slots, for example. Getting more of its games on those big boy networks versus having them on the ACC network. Looking at, super sexy things like revenue distribution splits of carriage rights in new states. All the things that, sports reporters dream of covering. Those are the sorts of things that are going to be up for discussion in February. But again, this is not a situation where ESPN can go, you know what, we're dumping the ACC, we don't need them, and it sets off another wave of power realignment. That is not the case, and that is not going to come to fruition in February.
And the other thing about it for me was, because if we're complaining that the ACC is not getting enough money from ESPN, then from the other perspective, the ESPN is sitting there going, man, are we getting great value? Why would you give up something you're not paying, essentially through the nose for when you don't have to? And the truth is, I mean, if ESPN was interested in dropping the base package, I would imagine that Jim Phillips and the ACC could take, let's just say, 2 Duke Carolina basketball games, as well as some pretty good football games, and take those to market and get, I think, maybe at least what ESPN has offered them, and maybe a lot more. So it might actually be a financial benefit if ESPN were to back off, but I don't think they're going to either. All right, getting out of something that basketball, mavens like yourself like to talk about. What are your thoughts? Let's start with North Carolina. RJ Davis still here. The team around him, is it going to be as good as it was a year ago? I mean, theoretically, because we know that it wasn't great. But what are your thoughts on what North Carolina is going to have around RJ Davis?
Yeah, sometimes the best gets are the ones you keep. And so North Carolina didn't necessarily add, quote unquote star in the transfer portal. But it does bring in a guy in Cade Tyson who can be a new Brady Manick. You bring in 2 top 10 freshmen, one of whom in Drake Powell is, looking very much like a lottery type talent in Chapel Hill. You bring back Elliot Cadeau for another year. You bring back Seth Trimble for another year. You're talking about a lot of depth and a lot of talent around the perimeter for this team. I think it's going to be one of the best perimeter groups in the league. The front court is where I have questions. Armando Bacot is, after 18 years of school, finally gone. And North Carolina did not bring in a one-for-one replacement to be its, every single game, 30-minute-a-game starting center. It's going to be by committee. It's going to be some Jalen Washington and some face-up game. It's going to be Van Allen Lubin from Vanderbilt, who I really liked a lot in high school, but is probably about 6'8". I do think you're going to see some time where Jalen Withers is a small ball 5, and he's 6'10", a little leaner but strong. That is the part that concerns me. I think that defensively, because of North Carolina's size, it's probably going to get picked on. If you're a North Carolina fan, get ready for some games in the 80s. But the perimeter talent on this team is too good for North Carolina to, slip below, I would say, the top 3 or 4 teams in the league.
All right, now to the Blue Devils, who brought in one of those recruiting classes, especially when you look at Cooper Flagg, Kalman Malawash. I know I've completely butchered the name. Well, I'll figure it out by the time we watch him for the first time. But they have a lot of talent, and they've got 2 returning guards. I guess at some point Tyrese Proctor is going to be that player, maybe not, but he's certainly going to be good. Caleb Foster coming back, especially when he got hurt late. They figured out how much they missed him. There's a lot of bodies for John Shire to figure out, plus 3 newcomers in terms of veteran transfers coming in. They are really set up to succeed today.
They are. I mean, when you talk about teams who win the national championship in today's era of college basketball, I mean, from an ingredient standpoint, Duke has everything you could ask for. It has 5-year guys who have been there before. Mason Gillis comes from Purdue, was in the national title game last year. So you have that. You have an elite young inflection of talent with Cooper Flagg and Kaman Malwatch. You have returners who know your system, who have been there, who have now been in it for multiple years. You have all of the pieces there. That's why I think Duke is going to be in that conversation for most of the year. However, like you said, there's a lot of bodies, and figuring out the exact pecking order, I think, is something that we can't know, and John Shire realistically can't know until this season gets underway. I think that while Duke has probably 13 guys who could play and would play at most places, obviously he's not going to play 13 guys. So, I mean, that rotation is going to get whittled down by, end of December into January to 8 or 9, probably 8. And if that's the case, there are going to be some, really, really talented guys sitting on the bench. But Duke has all of the necessary ingredients. It's making them all come together. I need to go back and find the exact stat, but I believe Duke is going to be the first men's college basketball team since Florida State in 2010 to not have a single rotation player under 6'5". So they're going to be gigantic. They're crazy talented. John's just got to get all the pieces to go together.
Yeah, but fortunately, he's learned from a head coach who always played 9 or 10. Wait, no. So never mind. Victoria asked me a question in One-Timers about NC State and the pressure being amped a little bit because the football team has not really even reached anything close to expectations. A joke about that, really, but how are they set up? I know Michael O'Connell, when he was banged up last year, they felt the absence, but no DJ Burns, among others, DJ Horn. How do they look to you on paper? Because coming back from a Final Four, there's a lot expected of that program again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, if you're an NC State fan last year and that run, I mean, you hope that it's not something you've got to live off for another 40 years, but it'll give you a little bit of a leash. The thing is, I don't know that, this team does not have the pure talent to compete with the likes of a Duke. I think Kevin Keatts would not even tell you that his team has, the national championship is well within our grasp if we do everything we're supposed to. However, that said, NC State, to me, definitely is a team that should be in the mix for the NCAA tournament again. You're talking about bringing back guys who were a part of a run like that in Jaden Taylor, who I think will step into a little bit more of that DJ Horn role. Again, Michael O'Connell, just mentioned him, obviously his importance in setting the table and sort of kicking off that run with the miracle shot. I wonder if they'll build a statue outside of the Lenovo Center one day. And then Ben Middlebrooks, who really came on strong in the NCAA tournament well. So, it sounds from everything that I've heard that Dontrez Styles, who, is a roundabout UNC Georgetown hybrid transfer, he has been terrific so far. He's somebody who is going to play some 3, going to play some small ball 4. He's going to take that Torn Dorn role from a few years ago. You're talking about Brandon Huntley-Hatfield from Louisville. He's somebody who can play. I don't know how much he can play with Middlebrooks, but between the two of them, that's a really solid ACC center duo. There are enough pieces here for NC State to make it back to the NCAA tournament. I actually would kind of argue the opposite. I don't know that there is pressure. I mean, Kevin Keatts has made 2 tournaments in a row. He just did this run. I think there is to some extent, there's an expectation to make the NCAA tournament, but I would argue that NC State fans should have that expectation.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know that this is going to be like a national contender team or a regularly ranked top 25 one. But in terms of being a top 50 team in the country that has a realistic shot of making the NCAA tournament, absolutely that is fair to say.
Brendan Marx wins awards for a reason. He is great. I appreciate your time, sir. It's good to get back on your, text messages. I have no idea what I was about to say.
I'm glad to be back. I'm coming out of hibernation, so I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate your time, man.
Talk to you. Bye.
You got it.